The Art of Leadership Network.
Well, hey, leaders, welcome to the Lead Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jenni Catron, CEO of the Foresight Group. We're a company dedicated to helping leaders develop thriving teams. I'll be your guide as we explore practical strategies to equip you with the tools you need to lead with clarity, confidence, and build unstoppable momentum in your organization. My mission is to be your trusted coach, empowering you to master the art of self-leadership so you'll learn to lead yourself well so you can lead others better. Each week, we take a deep dive on a leadership or a culture topic. You'll hear stories from amazing guests and leaders like you who are committed to leading well. So let's dive in and keep learning on this leadership journey together. Well, friends, welcome back to the Summer of Leadership series. We've been working through this over the last few weeks, and we're talking about the 8 critical skills for culture-carrying leaders. Now, last week, we talked about emotional intelligence and how that really sets you apart as a leader in an automated world. The week before that, we talked specifically about self-leadership. So if you're just jumping in, make sure you go back and catch some of the earlier episodes in this series. But today, we're going to explore a skill that's as foundational as it is overlooked. And it is the topic of communication. See, communication is more than just passing along information. I really believe it's a sign of respect, especially in the workplace, really in any relationship. Communication at its heart is a sign of respect. And so I want to talk about this today because when we're doing culture work with organizations and we do our staff-wide survey, nearly every team we work with, communication shows up as one of the big 3 core issues. So we know we don't have this mastered, right? This is a challenging one for us. But it's one of the most important messages that I share with leaders. Communication is how we align people, how we build trust and shape culture. But most of us tend to think we're far better at it than we really are, myself included. So today, let's talk about why. Let's take a look at this, and then I want to hopefully give you some steps and some ways to think about communication that can make it stronger and better for you and your team. See, here's the problem. Most leaders assume they're communicating more clearly than they actually are. Have you ever been guilty of this? A 2023 Gallup study found that only 7% of U.S. workers strongly agree that communication in their workplace is accurate, timely, and open. Only 7% of U.S. workers think that we actually do a good job of communication in the workplace. So we got some work to do. Meanwhile, 91% of employees say their leaders lack effective communication skills. So they're saying we don't have good communication in the workplace. And 91% of you say, yep, my leader does not communicate well. So friends, again, the data bears out. This is one we need to pay attention to. And you've had this happen, right? You thought you said something clearly, but your team heard something else. Or you thought they just knew, but you never actually said it. Like you thought they just understood it, right? And so this communication thing is really complicated. I was thinking back to a particular circumstance a number of years ago, and I wrote about this in my book, Just Lead, my very first book, which goes back a long time. I wrote a book called Just Lead. And in it, I talk about the story of a friend and I who were conversing over email about an event that we needed to work on together. So we're swapping emails back and forth and including the details. And then we met for lunch to discuss it further. And I was completely blindsided when my friend said that some of my correspondence in that email had hurt her feelings. In sharing the details and the specifics that would be necessary for the event, I had inadvertently conveyed a spirit of disinterest or unhelpfulness. I was just moving fast, which I'm incredibly guilty of, right? So I was lacking some self-awareness that we talked about last week. But my intention was to be thorough. Like I was trying to give her all the details and making sure I was communicating everything she needed. But without any personal interaction, she couldn't hear my tone. She couldn't read my nonverbal cues. So she misinterpreted my message. Or maybe I just didn't communicate well, right? There was a gap between what I was trying to communicate and what she was experiencing. And needless to say, I felt terrible because in my effort to try to give her all the right information, I was missing another part of communication, which was making sure that how I was delivering it was also helping it be received. So communication is hard, right? It is complicated. If culture is how we work together, then communication is how we make that possible. In healthy cultures, communication fosters clarity and connection. But in unhealthy cultures, a lack of communication breeds confusion, mistrust, and disengagement. And you've seen it. So leaders, what we need to recognize today as we dig into this topic is that we set the tone. If we don't prioritize communication, our teams will fill the gaps with just their own stories or interpretations. So the more we understand it, the better we can lean into it and hopefully perfect it. Let's dive into how to communicate with clarity and respect. And we're going to talk specifically about the what and the how of communication. I hold just a deep conviction that good communication is an act of respect for others. I told you that at the beginning, but good communication is an act of respect. And even with this strong belief, guys, I mess this up all the time. Communicating well and consistently is incredibly challenging. Playwright George Bernard Shaw said that the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Right? I think that's so profound. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Have you ever had a circumstance like that in your family where you thought you said something and your spouse is like, no, you did not tell me that? Happens all the time in the Catron house. Most of us think that we are better communicators than we are. But to be a good communicator requires intentionality. Like we have to be super intentional about this. And when I say good communicator, I'm not even talking about public speaking, right? That's not even on the radar right now. I'm talking about learning the best practices that allow your everyday interactions to provide the clarity and direction that equips others to succeed. This is huge. Now, I want to hit on just a few inhibitors to good communication. First, just lacking awareness of the information that others need. Like sometimes we're just not even paying attention to what others need. Oftentimes we're so familiar with the information that we forget that others might not have it, right? So just being aware, this is that emotional intelligence piece, right? Awareness of others and what do they need. Sometimes an inhibitor to good communication is busyness. We're moving so fast that we're not slowing down to consider what needs to be communicated. If you ever felt like that, you're like, I just got to get it done. I just got to get it done. And you're not stopping to think, who else needs to know this? Another inhibitor to good communication is a lack of systems or processes to ensure that the right information gets to the right people at the right time. See, the heart of good communication comes down to thinking on behalf of others first. So you see how all of these skills start to align with each other? That emotional intelligence one from last week starts with the self-awareness and the others' awareness. And so communication starts with an awareness of what do others need. And so this is what great leaders do. Leadership is about serving others, and communicating well is a way that we serve those we lead. So we need to think about it in that way. To be a good communicator requires attention to both the what and the how of communication. What is the actual information we need to share, right? Just what do we need to communicate? But the how is both the practical systems and processes by which we deliver information, and often more critically, the emotional intelligence we employ in communicating with others. And that was what was lacking for me in that story I shared earlier of my friend and I who are working on an event. And I was giving her all the what, but I wasn't conscious of the how. So today, I want to take just a closer look at these two things of, again, how can we communicate with clarity and respect, the what and the how of communication. On any given day, a flurry of activity occurs within your team and throughout your organization, right? There's just a zillion things going on every day. And think for a moment about all the decisions you make in that day and all the tasks you accomplish, right? There's a lot going on if you start thinking about every little thing. Now, consider how many people were impacted by your decisions and actions, right? You're not operating in a bubble by yourself. Somebody is impacted by what you're doing every day. You certainly made decisions and took action, and I'm even more confident that someone else was impacted by those decisions and actions. So how did you do? Did you communicate the right information to the right people in a timely manner? Most of the time, I get a no on that, like a fail, right? Like, again, so many things to be thinking about, so many things we're doing. And so it takes a great deal of intentionality to be purposeful in communication. So I have found that there are 3 simple questions that help me be more intentional in my communication. And so I want to walk you through these really quickly because I actually, you guys, if you took nothing else away from this podcast except for these 3 questions, I think it would have a tremendous effect on your communication just by slowing down to ask these 3 questions. And the first one is this: just who needs to know? And this is all about thinking on behalf of others. What do they need? How do I help them succeed? If I'm about to make a decision or take action, again, working on a team. Somebody's going to be impacted by what I'm doing. So just who needs to know? Starting with that question. Then I need to say, well, what specifically do they need to know? And this question prevents overload and it ensures clarity. It forces me to think more deliberately about how to support them with the right information. So what do they need to know? I might discover that there's 3 or 4 people who need to know something based upon what I'm working on, but every one of those people might need something a little different. They might need to know something just a little bit different. So what do they need to know? And it forces me think more deliberately and support them with the right information. So who needs to know? What do they need to know? And then the third one is, when do they need to know it? And this question really protects trust and it prevents misalignment because I want to make sure that my communication is timely, that I'm getting the right information to the right people at the right time. Friends, just that simple intentionality becomes a game changer. These 3 questions slow you down long enough to think more deliberately about what you're doing and whom it impacts. Great teams recognize that everything you do impacts someone else, right? You are not operating in a silo. Someone will be impacted by the decisions you make or the actions you take. Someone somewhere is going to have an impact. So if you ask yourself these 3 questions when you're about to make that decision or take action, they'll guide you to become a more thoughtful and intentional communicator. So that's a huge step forward. If you stopped and you played this for your team, maybe you oversee a team, maybe you oversee a whole staff team, like just training everybody on your team to think through these 3 questions, friends, I promise you it will begin to shore up some of the communication gaps. But let's talk for a minute about the how. How are you delivering the message? And the how of communication really is twofold. So we'll start with the practical side first. You've probably noticed that good culture requires a system to support it, right? So this practical side is really helpful. And the same is true in communication. You need good systems to foster efficient communication. That requires being clear about which tools you use for what type of communication. I cannot tell you the number of times that I'm working with a client and the communication issue comes up and immediately team members go to all of the different tools that everybody uses. This department likes Slack. This department uses WhatsApp. We're all supposed to be working in Teams, but some of us are still working in Google Docs. And like all of a sudden, we get a laundry list of like 20 different applications that everybody is using or some people are using, and there's no consistency. So we have no idea of whether that information came to me, but it came to me in a tool that I don't use, right? So just getting clarity on the systems we use is a major step forward in communication. So, for example, with the Foresight team, Here are the tools we use and what their purpose is. And this is really important. If you're a leader who has influence over defining these systems, clarifying which tool we use and what we use it for is really, really helpful. So here's a couple examples. For us, we use email, but it's for non-urgent information sharing, right? If it's like, hey, you need to know this, or here's a report that, with detail, it's non-urgent, but it's information that we need. We often will use email. We will use Asana for project management and task assignment. So we will use that to help us, project manage. We use Slack for short, quick updates or questions, as well as like personal updates and fun stuff. So we usually try to make sure we don't give each other too many tasks in Slack because they can get lost more quickly, at least in how we use it. And so we use it just for short, quick updates and questions. One-on-one meetings are for personal connection, discussions, coaching, feedback, those more in-depth conversations, the things that we like to happen more eyeball to eyeball. And then team meetings are where we do updates that impact everybody. We have bigger discussions. We have group decisions. So just clarifying what tools you use for what purpose extraordinarily helps your team create more alignment. I should also mention, texts are for time-sensitive information. Like, we don't text one another unless it's really more time-sensitive. And then phone is for sensitive information or when immediate dialogue is necessary. And you can see that as soon as we create that list of what we use and then how we use it, and everybody understands that, then there's more cohesiveness, right? There's more synergy in our communication patterns. That alone is a game changer, you guys. And it's not an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of how you can improve communication with your team by being clear about the tools you use and what purpose they serve. So that's a big one in the how. The second part of the how has to do with your emotional intelligence. So we're hearkening back to last week's episode. Your emotional intelligence in the delivery of the information. So one of the great misunderstandings we have in our house is how we say things to each other, right? Like, just tone. It's rarely what we say that creates offense. It's how we say it. We're all guilty of this, right? Maybe you're in a hurry and you say something and you didn't consider how it came out, or that you sounded a little bit irritated, or maybe you were irritated and maybe you were frustrated, but that wasn't necessarily what you wanted to communicate in that moment. Several studies have reinforced what Albert, a researcher of body language, identified. I can't say his last name, Albert Mehrabian, a researcher of body language. He found that communication is 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and 7% words only. Now, let me say that again. Communication is 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and 7% your words. So the actual words are a small percentage of your communication. It's the nonverbal, it's how you say things, like the tone and inflection, and then the words. So great leaders employ those 4 categories of emotional intelligence that we discussed last week to ensure that what they say doesn't get overshadowed or misunderstood by how they say it. So friends, we're just scratching the surface on communication, but the power in just a couple of things I've given you today, those 3 questions: who needs to know, what do they need to know, and when do they need to know it? That alone is going to help accelerate things. Clarifying the tools you use for communication and giving your team streamlined approach to, these are the tools we use and here's how we use them. And then continuing to develop yourself and your team to be emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent around how you communicate. Those 3 things in sync will be a game changer in how your team communicates. So here's a few applications for you today. I would just invite you to reflect on for yourself, am I assuming communication is happening, or am I ensuring it, right? Am I just assuming it's happening? Am I assuming they're catching it? Am I assuming they understand? Or am I ensuring it? Am I circling back? Am I clarifying? Where has my team felt out of the loop lately? Like just thinking about that for a minute and go, you know what, where was someplace that they felt out of the loop? And so just thinking that through and going, okay, what was it that I maybe could have done different or better that would have helped them feel more included? And then asking yourself, what messages are they waiting to hear from me? What does my team need to know? How can I be proactive about communication? Leaders, that's one of the big things for us is that oftentimes we're moving so fast that we are not thinking ahead enough to make sure the right people are getting the right information in a timely manner that doesn't frustrate them, but actually helps support them. So just some personal reflection there. Am I assuring communication is happening? Where has my team felt out of the loop? What messages are they waiting to hear from me? Just some good questions to help you think through this. And then here's a couple other ideas that you might consider. Audit your communication channels. What's working? What's overwhelming? Do we have too many different tools we use for different things or same things? One team uses this, another team uses this. Just an audit of the tools you use for communication is really helpful. Set clear expectations for what channel is used for what. So do the audit and then set the expectation of what we do use and don't use. Have a weekly rhythm for proactive communication to your team. So how do we make sure that the right people get the right information? Do we have a regular update, once a week where we make sure that everybody's getting the information? Are we using our all staff meeting or our team meeting to communicate updates? And are we conscious of what needs to be updated in those meetings? Figure out a rhythm that is predictable and everybody knows what to expect in those environments. And then practice clarifying the why behind a change or a decision. So if you're about to make a change of some kind or it's a bigger decision, spending some time clarifying the why so they really hear your heart, you're thinking through that emotional intelligence piece where you're slowing down enough to consider others, consider your tone, your delivery, and make sure you're communicating in a manner that really helps ensure that what you're saying is heard. All right, friends, tons in this one for you, but I would say pick one of those things and just zero in on it, focus on it this week. And then next week, we're going to dive into decision making. Now, this is another biggie inside of teams, and particularly for leaders who are culture shapers. How are you making decisions, and does your team understand your process in decision making? So we're going to dig into that next week. I want to encourage you, if you're learning to communicate clearly, you're learning to lead with integrity, right? You're building that trust. And so the focus on communication is an extraordinary gift to your team. Like this one will accelerate your trust and your connection with your team. And if you're craving some structure and feedback around communication, maybe you're like, you know what, I need a few more tools. Join us in the Summer Leadership Institute, which is a course that we have with coaching supporting it to help you dig deeper on some of these skills that we're talking about. It's built to help you strengthen these 8 core skills in real time with a one-on-one coach. So you can email me at Jenni Catron, JenniCatron, at getforesight.com, GET4SIGHT.com. And I will share the link and I'll get you all the details. So just email me, Jenni Catron at getforesight.com, and I'll give you the details on the Summer Leadership Institute, which is a course and one-on-one coaching to help you take these skills even further. Friends, communication is a sign of respect. So don't underestimate the impact of clarity. Your words build or break the trust your team has in you, and communication is a major tool for that. This week, communicate on purpose, not just for alignment, but to create connection. Culture grows in the presence of clarity. If this was helpful to you, would you share it with a friend? Tell somebody about it. Maybe listen to it as a team. Give us a rating and review. And then keep leading well. Friends, we need your leadership. We're not perfect at any of this. These are skills that we are constantly learning and growing. Like, we're not going to perfect these. We're going to keep growing and developing them. So be encouraged. Look for the places where you can add a little more clarity, where you can be a little more intentional with your communication. And then come back and join me next week for the topic of decision making.